The twin suns of the alien world beat down on the grand arena, turning the golden sand into a sea of shimmering light. Tens of thousands of voices filled the air, a mix of deep rumbling tones and high, sharp calls. The towering alien race, known across the galaxy as the Valorians, had gathered for a spectacle they loved most: combat. Today, however, the atmosphere was different. Today was not just another match between two of their warriors. Today, a human would fight. Daniel stood in the center of the arena, small compared to the alien guards who had shoved him forward only moments before. The stands stretched up like walls around him, filled with giants whose glowing armor caught the sunlight. He could hear their laughter rolling down like thunder, a sound that shook his chest and made the ground seem to tremble. He was not supposed to be here. Daniel was not a soldier of the Valorians. He was a wanderer, an engineer, a man who had crossed the wrong star system and been captured when his ship was pulled out of the void. The aliens thought it amusing to throw a human into the arena, to see how quickly he would break. The gates at the far end of the arena groaned open, and the sound of metal scraping stone echoed like thunder. From the shadowed passage she emerged. Princess Clera, daughter of the High Warlord, strode forward, tall and radiant in her shining armor. Her long silver hair streamed behind her, a crown of jagged steel resting upon her head. The crowd roared. Her name. She was not only royalty, but the undefeated champion of their games. She carried a sword nearly as long as Daniel was tall. The blade shimmered with a faint energy field, designed to cut through steel like cloth. She raised it high and the sunlight caught the weapon, blinding in its brilliance. Then she turned her eyes on Daniel. The mocking smile spread across her face even before she spoke. This is what you bring me to fight?" Her voice carried, easily projected through the arena's amplifiers. The crowd laughed with her, their massive voices rumbling like a storm. Daniel's only weapon was a crude spear, a broken shard of metal tied with strips of cloth to a wooden shaft. It had been tossed to him as if it were a joke, something for the audience's amusement. To them, it was not even a weapon, only a stick with sharp edges. Clera circled him, her boots crunching the sand. "Is that your weapon, little human?" she asked, tilting her head mockingly. "If you can call it that." The laughter from the stand swelled again. The aliens slammed their fists against the stone railings, their voices booming. They wanted to see blood. They wanted to see the fragile outsider humiliated. But Daniel did not answer her taunts. He stood still, the crude spear steady in his hands. His eyes never left her armor, her sword, her movements. He studied the way the plates overlapped, the way the joints flexed when she shifted her stance. Something about his silence unsettled her. Most enemies shouted or cursed back at her. Most tried to prove their strength with noise before the battle even began. But this human stood calm, unmoved by the storm of ridicule around him. The announcer's voice thundered across the arena. "Let the duel begin!" A deep gong rang, the sound vibrating through the sand. Clera moved first. She swung her massive sword in a wide arc, the force of it throwing sand into the air. Daniel leapt back, the blade missing him by inches. The ground shook where it struck, a crack forming in the stone beneath the sand. The crowd cheered. "Run, little human," Clera shouted, her eyes flashing with amusement. "Run until your legs give out." But Daniel did not run. He shifted his stance, holding the spear low, his breathing steady. She swung again, faster this time, testing him. Again he dodged, rolling aside just as the blade smashed into the sand. Dust rose around them, filling the air. The fight, at least to the aliens, was entertainment. To Daniel, it was survival. He knew he could not match her strength. He could not block her weapon. One mistake, one late step, and he would be cut down. His only chance was to wait, to watch, to understand the rhythm of her strikes. The princess noticed his focus and narrowed her eyes. "You do not scream. You do not beg. Are you too proud to admit fear, human?" Daniel still said nothing. His silence was more powerful than any insult. It was as if he denied her the satisfaction of seeing him afraid. The crowd began to shift in mood. Their laughter quieted slightly. A murmur rippled through them as they realized the fight was not ending. Quickly, some leaned forward, watching closely. Perhaps this would not be as simple as they thought. Clyra lunged suddenly, her sword flashing downward. Daniel twisted aside, sand spraying around his boots. The blade scraped the arena floor, sparks flying. He moved with surprising speed for his size, his body light compared to her heavy armor. Each movement was precise, measured, controlled. Still, he never struck back. Not yet. The princess's pride swelled with every swing, but so did her frustration. She wanted to end the fight. She wanted to hear the crowd roar for her victory. And yet this human denied her that satisfaction. He refused to fall, and worse, he made her waste energy. For the first time in her life, the champion of the Valorians felt something she did not understand. Was it irritation? Or respect? The duel continued, the suns beating down on them, the air thick with heat and dust. Daniel's shirt clung to his back with sweat, but his eyes never wavered. He knew the truth. No armor was perfect, no fighter, invincible, and somewhere in her shining plates of steel there would be a weakness. He only had to find it. The crowd could not see it, but Daniel already had. The arena thundered with the sound of alien voices. The Valorians loved the spectacle, and their eyes followed every movement. They were expecting blood, expecting Daniel to collapse under the sheer force of Princess Clyra's attacks. Yet minutes passed, and the human had not fallen. He moved lightly on the sand, avoiding every crushing blow that came at him. This was not what the crowd had imagined. The laughter that had begun so strong was now mixed with confusion. Clyra, still in full control of the fight, raised her sword, again. Her silver armor gleamed, and the energy lines running across her blade pulsed with power. She pressed forward, her boots kicking up sand. Daniel backed away slowly, his crude spear steady in his hands. "You amuse me, human," she called, out, her voice echoing across the arena. "You dodge like a small animal. That stick in your hands is nothing against me." She slammed her sword against her own armor with a loud clang, sparks bursting into the air. The crowd cheered, pounding the railings. "See this?" she continued, spreading her arms wide so all could see her brilliance. "This armor is forged from the heart of a star. No weapon of your kind could ever break it. Your little blade is nothing but scrap metal tied to wood." Her taunts rolled over Daniel, but he did not answer. He breathed slowly, watching, listening, waiting. Every insult only made her more reckless. Clyra laughed, lowering her sword again. "Do you think silence makes you brave? Do you believe patience will save you?" She lunged forward, her blade cutting through the air in a deadly arc. Daniel ducked, the tip of the sword slicing past his shoulder with a rush of wind. He hit the sand with one knee, but quickly pushed himself back, upholding the spear in front of him. His heart pounded in his chest, yet his mind stayed sharp. He had survived another strike. The crowd roared again, some cheering for their princess, others beginning to shout in surprise at the human's skill. No one had expected him to last this long. Clyra's grin widened, but behind her smile was a flicker of irritation. She was used to quick victories. She was used to the cheers that followed her crushing blows. But this time every moment stretched longer. This human did not give her the easy win she desired. "You dare make me waste my time?" she snapped. "I will end this with one strike." Daniel shifted his stance, placing his feet firmly in the sand. His eyes focused on her joints, the places where her armor plates overlapped. At her shoulder, at her elbow, at her hip, small cracks where the light of the suns gleamed faintly. Weakness, not large, not obvious, but there. He gripped the spear tighter. Not yet. He needed the perfect moment. Clyra swung again, the sound of her blade cutting through the air sharp and terrifying. Daniel stepped aside, just beyond reach, the sand swirling beneath his boots. Her blade struck the arena floor, sparks flying again. The crowd gasped. Some even began to shout warnings to their princess, though she ignored them. She was determined now. She would not let a human embarrass her before her people. Stand still, she roared, charging forward. Face me like a warrior. Daniel's lips tightened. He knew the truth. If he stood still, he would die. He was not here to prove himself with pride. He was here to survive. The fight turned into a chase. Cleara swung left, right, down, each strike filled with power. Daniel dodged, ducked, rolled, always keeping just ahead of her blade. The crowd's energy rose higher and higher, their voices a storm of sound. And still, Daniel did not strike back. His spear remained ready, but unused. He was not wasting energy on foolish attacks. He was learning her rhythm, her timing. Every motion she made was a lesson. Cleara's pride grew heavy inside her chest. Sweat formed on her brow beneath the crown. Her arms began to ache, though she would never admit it. This was not how the duel was meant to go. This was not the easy victory she had imagined when she mocked his weapon. She stopped suddenly, her chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. She lifted her sword and pointed it at him. Enough games, she growled. You cannot run forever. Daniel stood tall again, his breathing calm though his body was tired. He raised his spear, meeting her gaze. His silence was an answer, more powerful than words. The crowd fell into a strange hush, sensing something changing. This was no longer a game. This was becoming a true battle. Cleara smirked, though her pride was wounded. Very well, human. Show me what you can do. Strike me if you dare. Prove to my people that your scrap metal is worthy of a warrior's respect. She lowered her guard slightly, exposing her chest plate, daring him to attack. The crowd gasped at her boldness. None of her opponents had ever been given such a chance. But Daniel did not move. He stared at her armor, at the cracks near her joints, at the places where her body moved beneath the plates. He could strike now, but it would be useless. He knew it. She wanted him to waste his strength, to prove her right. So he waited. The silence stretched long in the arena. The crowd grew restless. Some shouted for the princess to crush him. Others jeered at the human for being a coward. Cleara's smirk faded. His refusal to take the bait angered her more than anything. Her pride screamed inside her chest. This small human dared to ignore her challenge. This small human dared to make her wait. Her grip on the sword tightened. Then I will break you. Myself, she hissed. She charged forward again, her blade raised high. Daniel steadied his spear. His heart pounded faster now, for he knew the moment was coming. One mistake, one slip, and it would all be over. But if he was patient enough, if he timed it perfectly, he could strike where no alien ever thought possible. The duel was no longer a joke. It was no longer about mockery. It was about pride and survival. The crowd rose to their feet, the air filled with roars, cheers, and cries. They could feel the tension, could sense the clash that was about to come. And as Cleara's sword came, down once more Daniel prepared himself. His eyes narrowed, his hands tightened, his mind focused. The moment of truth was drawing near. The arena burned under the twin suns. The heat shimmered off the sand, making the air ripple like water. Dust floated through the golden light, stirred up by every strike of the princess's great sword. The crowd roared louder and louder, their voices rising with every clash. They had thought this fight would be short, yet it dragged on, each moment building more tension. Daniel's chest rose and fell quickly, but his eyes remained sharp. His spear, if it could even be called that, felt heavy in his hands now, though he kept his grip steady. The cloth binding the rusted blade to the wooden shaft had loosened slightly from the constant movement, but it still held. Every step he took was careful, measured, deliberate. Cleara circled him again, her silver armor shining in the suns. Her breaths came harder now, though she tried to hide it. Each swing of her glowing sword was as powerful as the last, yet slower than before. She was still strong, still terrifying, but not untouched by fatigue. You dragged this out far too long, human, she called, her voice edged with annoyance. You should have fallen already. You should have given the crowd their victory. Daniel didn't answer. He never had. His silence gnawed at her pride more than any insult could. It made her feel like she was the one being tested. The crowd noticed too. The laughter that had filled the arena at the beginning had faded into a restless murmur. Some aliens shouted for her to finish the fight. Others began to whisper about the humans' strange calmness. It was not strength, not power, but something else they were beginning to see. Clyra slashed forward again, her sword cutting through the hot air. Daniel rolled aside, sand clinging to his arms as he sprang back to his feet. Her blade smashed into the stone floor beneath the sand, sparks bursting upward. The sound echoed like thunder, but Daniel was already moving. He circled her, eyes scanning every inch of her armor. He had seen it before, the way the plates overlapped, the way the joints bent. And with every strike, every step, those small weaknesses became clearer. At her shoulder, where the plates met, a faint crack had appeared. At her elbow, the armor shifted more loosely now. At her hip, where the heavy plate strained under movement, the faintest gap was visible. No armor was perfect, not even that of a princess. Daniel's lips pressed together tightly. He had found the path. But patience was still his greatest weapon. If he struck too soon, she would block him. If he waited just a little longer, the weakness would grow. Clyra's frustration mounted. She was no stranger to victory. She was a warrior born and raised for battle. She had crushed countless challengers, stood over endless victories. Yet here she was, sweating beneath her crown, unable to land a single decisive strike against a human. "Why do you not fight back?" she demanded, her voice filled with both anger and disbelief. "Are you afraid to strike me? Do you think waiting will change your fate?" Daniel's silence was his answer. He held his spear low, his eyes locked on her. His focus was unshakable. The princess growled in frustration and charged again, her sword lifted high. Daniel leapt to the side, the blade barely missing him. Sand sprayed upward, showering them both. The crowd rose from their seats, their booming voices shaking the air. They had never seen their champion so pushed, never seen her pride tested like this. Some began to cheer not just for her, but for him. A human, standing against a warrior princess. It was unthinkable, and yet it was happening before their very eyes. Daniel felt their voices pressing down on him, but he forced himself to block them out. He could not afford distraction. His mind was a storm of focus, every detail of Clyra's movements locked inside it. He could almost predict her steps now, the rhythm of her strikes, the way her weight shifted before each swing. Every second he survived was another victory. Every dodge, every roll, every sidestep carved into her pride. Clyra's breath came heavier, now her sword arm aching. She would never admit weakness, not before her people, but Daniel could see it. The way her swing slowed, the way her chest rose and fell, the faint tremble in her gauntlet when she gripped the blade too tightly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. The moment was drawing closer. Still, he did not rush. He reminded himself of lessons, drilled into him long ago. On Earth, he had trained with tools and weapons not to overpower but to endure. His instructors had told him, strength fades, speed falters, but patience can outlast them all. He took a slow breath. The sound of the crowd faded in his mind. The heat of the suns, the dust in the air, the stinging sweat in his eyes. He pushed it all aside. There was only her armor, her weapon, and the small cracks that grew larger with every strike. Clyra stopped for a moment, glaring at him. Her pride boiled. This was no longer just a fight. This was a challenge to her honor. How could a human stand against her so long? How could he deny her the victory she deserved? "You shame me," she spat, her voice shaking with fury. "You shame me before my people. I will break you, and I will break that toy in your hands." Her voice echoed across the arena, and the crowd roared with excitement. But under that roar was something else now, a current of unease. They could see her pride unraveling. They could see the human's calm patience standing against her storm. Daniel did not speak. He did not lower his weapon. He only adjusted his stance, ready for what would come next. Clyra charged again, her sword swinging with all her strength. Daniel ducked low, the blade missing by a hair. He spun around her, sand spraying beneath his boots, and saw it, the gap at her hip widening as she twisted. It was there, the opening he needed. But still, he waited. He knew she had not yet reached the peak of her pride. He knew she would strike, harder, faster, more desperate. And when she did, her armor would fail her completely. The duel continued, a dance of fury and patience. Clyra struck with power. Daniel answered with silence. She burned with pride. He endured with calm. The crowd's voices swelled, caught between loyalty to their princess and awe for the human who refused to fall. And as the suns dipped lower, casting long shadows across the arena, Daniel's eyes gleamed. He knew the moment was close. Very close. For now, patience was his weapon. Soon, precision would be his victory. The arena had become a furnace of noise and heat. The alien crowd filled the air with thunderous voices, pounding their fists against the stone railings, as if the rhythm itself could fuel the princess's strength. The suns hung lower now, their rays burning through the dust, painting everything in gold and red. Daniel stood in the center of it all, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Sweat rolled down his face, but his eyes never wavered. He kept his spear ready, the crude weapon seeming almost laughable against the brilliance of Clyra's glowing sword. Yet he gripped it with certainty, as if it were the most important weapon in the universe. Clyra glared at him from across the sand. Her armor still shone, but it bore marks now, scratches from the ground, faint cracks where the plates strained. Her breaths came heavier, her grip on the sword tighter. Pride still burned in her chest, but it was no longer untouched. She was fighting not only for victory, but for her dignity. "You cannot outlast me, human," she called, her voice sharp as steel. "I am born of war. I am trained in fire. You will fall, and your people will remain what they are. Small shadows in the galaxy." The crowd roared at her words, cheering for their champion. Yet beneath the noise there were murmurs. They had seen her struggle. They had seen the human stand tall far longer than expected. Something had shifted in their hearts, though few would admit it aloud. Clyra raised her sword high, the blade glowing with a fierce light. She let out a battle cry that shook the arena and charged. Her boots crushed the sand as she closed the distance in an instant, swinging her blade down with a strike meant to end everything. Daniel moved. He had watched her for so long. Watched. Her movements, her rhythm, her armor. He had learned the pattern of her strikes, the weight of her steps, the way her shoulders shifted before each attack. And in that moment, he saw it. The flaw revealed fully. The crack in her armor at her hip, widened from strain, glowing faintly where the light of the suns touched it. He twisted to the side, the sword slamming into the ground beside him with an earth-shaking crash. Dust and sparks flew upward. The crowd gasped. Daniel's body moved with precision. His spear darted forward, not wild, not desperate, but controlled. The tip of the broken blade found the opening at her hip and drove in with all the force his body could give. The sound was sharp, like glass breaking. A crack split across the princess's armor. The energy that shimmered along its surface flickered, then burst outward in sparks. The mighty plates shattered around the strike, fragments scattering into the sand. The entire arena froze. Clyra staggered back, her eyes wide in shock. She clutched at her side where the spear had struck. Her pride hit harder than her body. Her glowing sword dipped slightly, the weight suddenly too heavy in her hand. The silence in the arena was deafening. Tens of thousands of eyes watched, unable to believe what they had seen. A human, a small, fragile human, had broken the armor of their champion princess with a single precise strike. Daniel stepped back, his chest heaving, his spear still held in his hands. He did not shout in triumph. He did not mock her as she had mocked him. He simply stood, steady, calm, his eyes locked on hers. Clyra's voice broke the silence, low at first, almost a whisper. Impossible. Her words carried across the arena, caught by the amplifiers. The crowd stirred, confusion spreading among them. Warriors in the front rows leaned forward, their eyes wide, their hands gripping the railings. Mothers hushed their children, their voices lost in disbelief. Clyra fell to one knee, the sand crunching beneath her armor. Her pride, her strength, her confidence, all of it shook inside her. Never before had anyone, not even her fiercest challengers, struck her so cleanly. Never before had her armor, forged by the greatest smiths of her world, been broken. The silence stretched long, heavy, almost unbearable. Then slowly, a ripple spread through the crowd. A sound, not laughter, not mockery, but awe. A voice shouted from the stands, "The human struck true." Another followed, "He shattered her armor." Soon, voices rose all around the arena, not in unity, but in chaos. Some still cheered for their princess, demanding she rise and finish him. Others began to chant for the human, their voices filled with wonder. Daniel lowered his spear slightly, his breathing slowing again. His eyes never left Clyra. He had struck her once, but he knew the duel was not yet finished. She was still a warrior, still dangerous. Yet in that moment he had proven what he needed to prove, that humans were not shadows, not toys, not weak. Clyra's hands trembled as she pushed herself upright, her broken armor clattering against itself. Her gaze met his, and for the first time it was not filled with arrogance, it was filled with something else, shock, disbelief, and a strange flicker of respect. "You," she whispered, her voice carrying across the silent air. "You found it. You found the weakness." Daniel did not answer. He simply lifted his spear again, ready for what would come. The duel was not over, but the world had already changed. The human had struck, and the empire of giants had witnessed the impossible. The princess's pride was shattered, and with it, the certainty of her people. The arena was silent in a way it had never been before. Tens of thousands of Valorians filled the stands, yet no one laughed, no one mocked, no one cheered. They all stared at the human standing tall in the center of the sand, his crude spear still in his hands, while their princess knelt before him with broken armor glittering around her like shattered glass. The suns hung low, painting the scene in long shadows. Dust floated in the air, catching the red light and making the arena glow as if it were frozen in time. Daniel's chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. His arms ached, his legs trembled, and every part of him screamed with exhaustion. But his eyes stayed firm. He had done what no one thought possible. He had struck the champion. Clyra's sword trembled in her grip. She stared at the sand before her, her pride crumbling inside her chest. She had mocked him, laughed at him, called his weapon a toy. She had promised her people an easy victory, but instead she had been the one struck down. Her voice, when it came, was heavy with disbelief. "How?" The word echoed across the arena. Daniel did not answer with words. He only looked at her, his eyes calm, and slowly lifted his spear in front of him, not as a threat but as a sign. His silence was its own answer. He had watched, he had waited, and when the time came he had struck with precision. No more explanation was needed. The crowd shifted uneasily. They were unused to seeing their princess defeated, even partly. Some shouted for her to rise and finish the fight. Others murmured in awe at the human's patience, his courage, his skill. For the first time in their history, the empire of giants saw a human not as prey, not as a servant, but as a warrior. Clyra clenched her jaw. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up from the sand. The broken plates of her armor clattered with each movement, reminding everyone of what had happened. She stood tall again, though her pride was wounded. Her eyes met Daniel's. This time, they were different. No longer filled with arrogance, no longer seeing him as something beneath her. She looked at him as an equal. "You fought with patience," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "You fought with precision, and you broke what no one else could break." The words sent a ripple through the crowd. Warriors who had once jeered now leaned forward in silence. Elders who had watched countless battles nodded slowly. Even children sitting on their parents' shoulders stared in wide-eyed wonder. Daniel lowered his spear slightly, his breathing steady. He could have finished her. He could have struck again while she was weak, but he didn't. He chose restraint. And that choice spoke louder than any strike could. Clara saw it too. Slowly, she lowered her sword. With deliberate movement, she drove its tip into the sand and let go. The glowing blade stood upright, a sign of surrender. Gasps rose from the crowd. Their princess had never lowered her weapon before. Then, before the entire empire, she extended her hand to Daniel. The moment stretched long. The crowd held its breath, waiting. Would the human mock her? Would he refuse? Daniel's eyes softened. He shifted his spear into one hand and stepped forward. Slowly, firmly, he reached out and took her hand. The arena erupted, not in laughter, not in mockery, but in thunderous cheers. It was not the victory they expected, but it was something greater. They had witnessed honor. They had seen respect exchanged between two who should have been enemies. Clara's voice rang out once more, stronger this time, though pride and humility mixed within it. "Let it be known," she declared, "that this human fought with the heart of a warrior. He did not fall. He did not beg. He endured, and he struck true. And for that, I honor him." The crowd roared again, their voices shaking the very stone of the arena. Some chanted her name, others shouted his. For the first time in history, the names of a human and a Valorian princess rose together. Daniel released her hand and stepped back. He did not raise his spear in triumph. He did not shout his victory. He stood quietly the same way he had fought, calm, steady, patient. Clara turned to face her people. Though her pride was wounded, her spirit had grown. She had learned something. In that arena, something more valuable than victory. She had learned that strength was not only in size, not only in power, but also in patience, in precision, in the will to endure. As the guards opened the gates and the crowd's cheers echoed, Daniel walked out of the arena beside her, not as a prisoner, not as prey, but as a warrior who had earned respect. The whispers spread quickly through the empire. "The human struck true," they said. "The human shattered the princess's armor." Soon the story would travel far, beyond the arena, across star systems, across worlds. And everywhere it went, the name of humanity would no longer be spoken with scorn, but with caution, and with respect. For Clara, the duel would forever mark the day her pride was broken and rebuilt anew. For Daniel, it was proof that humans could stand among giants and not be crushed. The empire had changed that day, even if few fully understood it yet. And so the human walked forward, his crude spear still in hand, knowing that the smallest weapon, when wielded with patience and precision, could strike harder than the mightiest blade.